The cat found a baby abandoned in the rails, but he did something that left everyone in awe. Most cats, especially female cats, understand when they're dealing with an infant. Some will absolutely protect a child if they sense something is a danger to them. When my daughter was born, my small female tabby would not allow our German shepherd anywhere near the baby. She once attacked the dog by jumping on his face while the dog retreated, trying to shake the cat off of her face. The dog was afraid of getting near the baby for a long time. Oftentimes, cats will act very nervous around children, I think, because they're afraid of hurting them. Also, cats tend to react with more patience when being manhandled by babies or toddlers, whereas they would bite or scratch an adult doing the same thing. They're less likely to do so with a small child and are more likely to just run away unless they're really being hurt. Cats are much smarter than is usually thought of them. In fact, there's been a study that cats are actually smarter than dogs, so smart, in fact, that they don't obey commands because they don't see the point in doing so. I think that they might see something that smells and looks familiar, but acts in a completely different, helpless way. Also, I've read somewhere that cats think of us as larger, dumber cats, so they would see human babies as huge, weird kittens. Also, though cats are usually thought of as aloof and independent, sometimes queens' female cats with litters will come other like lionesses in the wild that could transfer into their mixed pride of humans and cats and sometimes dogs. They probably recognize the smell of both baby's mother and father on baby, as cats have a much more sensitive sense of smell than we do. If your cat's accepted both the new mom and dad as part of its family, it'll guard baby as it would a new kitten of a cat higher in the colony than the cat. The relationship between that baby and the cat and the humans is in the hands of the humans, i.e. the parents should not allow the cat to lie with the baby, but allow it to sit or lie in a higher place than the baby so that the cat can watch the baby. Most cats will then alert the parents if the baby needs anything like a nappy change or a feed by staring at part of the baby which needs attention. If mom and or dad then attend to the baby, the cat will continue to watch the baby. The train sirens was on. The duty officer heard a cat's meow in the dark. He was afraid for the poor animal and immediately applied the emergency brake. But there was another surprise when duty officer saw how this amazing mama cat warming a baby in a blanket between rails, nearly death. Who dare do that for a baby? When animals being more humans than we are, Kay the cat knew that she had to do something to help because the baby was clearly in distress. The thought of running away and charging in the opposite direction of the crying didn't even cross her mind because she knew she couldn't leave the child. Instead, she knew she had to help in one way or another, which is why the story is so incredible. It tells the tale of an unlikely hero and an instinctive bond between animals and humans. However, to truly understand the story, we need to know a little more about where it all took place and who was involved, namely a Russian man named Anton. As a station worker, Anton has spent a huge part of his life living in a large apartment block surrounded by many friends and acquaintances. Yet, not all the friends are human. This area is also home to a cat named Katie who takes up residence in the entrance hall. It's believed that Katie first made her way into the Vladivostok station in 2012 and loved it so much she just didn't want to leave. Luckily, none of the workers had any problems with the fact that they had a new feline addition to their crew. They knew how cold it could get outside, and they wanted the cat to be as safe and happy as possible. Because of this, they'd make sure Katie was given food and water and acknowledged with strokes and greetings when they walked past. Katie lived a perfect life in the station building for around 3 years before something upset her daily antics in 2015. Katie was a relatively quiet cat and kept to herself, which is why the surrounding workers were so surprised and upset to hear Katie crying and meowing at the top of her lungs. One particular worker thought that Katie was being harmed in some way and immediately left her house to see what was really going on. She ran down to find Katie and was quickly followed by someone else. This worker wasn't the only one to hear Katie's intense cries. Anton, the cat savior, also heard the piercing noise from his office and knew something was wrong. Katie was such a huge part of his life, she just couldn't imagine how he would feel if he was hurt or injured in any way. So Anton followed the other residents and made his way downstairs to where Katie normally slept to find her sitting there and making noise. Soon, the two realized that Katie wasn't alone. The two officers stared at each other for a few seconds while they took in the scene in front of them. There was Katie in her normal spot, looking up at them, but there was also a new addition next to her, lying behind the garbage chute, and inside the box that Katie usually used as a bed was a baby. The workers were overwhelmed and had no idea what was going on, especially as Katie seemed to be protecting the baby that seemed to have been abandoned there and was clearly distressed. For some reason, Katie heard the baby crying and decided to take on responsibility for the abandoned child. Instead of hissing at him or scaring him, she decided to look after the baby as if it were her own and make sure that he was okay. Not only did she lay down next to the baby to keep him warm, but her presence also seemed to suit the child as it stopped crying as soon as she made her way into the bed. Anton and the other residents of the village were utterly shocked and couldn't believe the sight that was in front of them near the train rails. After the event, a Russian television network interviewed Anton by the name of RT. During this interview, she was asked about what his initial reaction was when he first saw Katie curled up next to an abandoned baby. He confessed that he was incredibly overwhelmed and had no idea what to do at first. It wasn't until he really looked at the situation that he realized Katie had actually been keeping the baby warm for hours and trying to get the attention of the people around her. Amazingly, Katie had been able to keep the young child shielded from the harsh conditions outside, and she may have even saved a baby's life. While those around Katie were incredibly impressed with her and her life-saving techniques, they were also incredibly worried about the child. Was it okay how long it had been there? Where were his parents? Irina could see that the baby was incredibly young. He was not a newborn, but he was perhaps around 2 months old and still vulnerable to the outside world. Katie had called for help and they needed to as well, so they decided to call the police and the paramedics. However, they didn't anticipate the fact that Katie would be quite so protective of the baby. In fact, Katie didn't want the baby to leave her sight. Because of this, Katie followed the baby wherever it was taken. However, Katie's nurturing side didn't end there. Near the station is usually the ambulance crew decided that it would be best to take the abandoned baby to the hospital to give them a real once-over and give them somewhere safe and warm to stay until they could find a place for him to live. Those who were on the scene could tell that Katie was a highly intelligent cat. She knew what was going on and she knew that the baby needed help. This cat wasn't going to rest until she knew her new friend was safe. In fact, workers at the station confirmed that Katie sat by the road for hours after the baby was taken away. It was almost as if she was waiting for him to return safe and sound so that she could continue to look after him. When the baby got to the hospital, he was immediately taken to the children's ward to be looked after. As soon as the hospital staff and Luna heard that the baby was safe as well, they immediately got stuck into their next job. They needed to find his parents or search for someone who had any idea where he came from. Since this incredible event, Katie has been treated like a celebrity. Those who live in the station block are incredibly proud of the fact that she not only looked after the baby, but she also did everything she could to ensure that he was as safe as he could possibly be. Even after the authorities arrived, Katie had become such a huge part of their lives. They also wanted to help the baby she had saved. Everyone seems to agree that if Katie had not been there to keep the baby warm, then it's certain the baby would have likely been killed by the harsh weather conditions of a Russian winter. After all, babies in particular need to be kept warm to stay healthy. Even the doctors have said the baby wouldn't have had a chance. Locals as well as those who heard the story have hailed Katie as a hero for the tremendous way she made sure the baby boy stayed safe. Some have speculated that it's possible the baby's parents felt that they were unable to take care of him, but had been too scared to take him to the hospital or an agency. Some have also wondered if they had known that Katie would watch out for the baby and alert someone to his presence. What Katie did to protect the baby boy was pretty incredible, and it makes you wonder how Katie knew what to do. Some believe that it must have been instinctual, perhaps even her maternal instincts. Cats are known to have strong maternal instincts to their kittens, but that's not all. These type of things are quite often hard to dissect, but that's why when you meet someone you can trust, you better hold on to them dearly. We still don't know whether the baby was reunited with his family or not, and to be honest, the fact that he was abandoned is still pretty painful to swallow. It's hard to comprehend that an innocent baby would be left alone like that with no one to take care of him. But the one silver lining is that thanks to this cat, he was saved. Thanks to the cat, the baby can potentially be adopted one day. This baby can make two parents extremely happy. Hearts around the world are now overjoyed. And to be honest, we wouldn't be surprised if this adorable baby gets adopted right away because of